So I'm here today for one of my favorite videos, and that is a TBR update talking about the books I plan to read over the spring. Now for the purpose of this video, I'm going to call it spring, March, April, and May. However, if you live in Canada, you know that spring doesn't really come until mid-May. There's a reason I'm still wearing a big heavy sweater as I record this. But I'm here to talk about all the books I'm going to be reading in the coming months, giving you an idea. And I'm going to be talking all genres, so horror, thriller, science fiction, fantasy, and all good things there, as well as books for my Patreon book club. All that being said, let's get started. First, let's talk about that Patreon book club. I always have a link down below if you want to join, support my channel, and hang out with us on my personal private Discord. And so I'm going to be talking about the books we'll be reading for the month 1st of March. That is a horror month, and we're going to be doing The Watcher by A.M. Shine. I don't know much about this book. I believe it's kind of a folksy, outdoorsy horror book, which was the theme for the month. It sounds great. I know one of my patrons loves this book, which gives me high hopes that I'm going to love it too. So I'm looking forward to that. And the next month is a fancy pick, and the book we chose is The Girl with the Ghost Eyes. This is a fancy story that is set in historical San Francisco in Chinatown, and it follows basically ghost hunters. I'm really excited for this one. I don't read a lot of urban fantasy, but the fact that it ties in with the supernatural is making me hopeful that the people in my book club who particularly normally read horror are hopefully going to join us for this one, because I think it's going to blend the two genres together. I love Asian-inspired fantasy, which was a theme for this month, and I think it's just going to make for a really fun April read as a group. It's our first time doing fantasy as a book club, and I'm hoping it won't be our last. Now for May, I actually don't know what book we're going to pick yet, but we are going to be doing a science fiction book. So if you're here for the sci-fi, definitely hope you consider joining up and sticking around for that. And then on top of that, my top tier patrons, my possessed patrons, get the option to nominate a book once every quarter for me to personally read. And it can be any genre, any length. If I can get my hands on the book, I am game to read it, whether it be something new to me, something I've never heard of. It's a really fun wild card. And so everyone nominates one out of that top tier, and then one of the books gets chosen by random. And I'm really excited for this one. I saw it on the list and I was excited because it's one I've wanted to read, one I was putting off only because it's not really a subgenre or age category I read a lot of, and that is The Daughter of Smoke and Bones by Laini Taylor. This is a YA fantasy book, and the reason again I haven't read it is that I don't tend to read a lot of YA fantasy for this channel. I do try to position myself as an adult fiction reader, which is what I read most of the time, but I remember getting on BookTube when that book first came out. Everyone was talking about it, and I really wanted to check it out, and I didn't, and now I feel like it's almost too late. I didn't really have a good excuse to do it, so this is the excuse I so badly needed. I'm very excited. I don't know much about it. I believe it's somewhat urban fantasy or secondary world fantasy, but it's set primarily in our world of Prague. I don't know too much more about it, but I think it'll be fun to do among the more serious adult fiction I tend to pick up. Alright, moving on to dark fiction, which can be thrillers, horror, or other just dark and creepy books that I want to include here. The first book I want to talk about is The Wanderers by Chuck Wendig, which I believe is post-apocalyptic fiction, so technically I could have stuck it in the sci-fi section, but I'm going to put it here. And I have loved this author's other work, so I've read The Book of Accidents, an all-time favorite of mine if you saw my top 15 horror books video, and then I also of course read Black River Orchard, which definitely could be a all-time favorite if I were to redo that list. And so the fact that I haven't read The Wanderers, which is one of their most beloved books, makes me hopeful it'll be a new favorite. I'm also worried I'm going to hate it because I can be very hit or miss when it comes to post-apocalyptic stories. The book is long, and there's probably a lot of traveling involved, as tends to be the case with these apocalyptic stories. So I'm nervous, but I have to try it. The possibility of finding another favorite by this beloved author who I've really, again, come to love, I can't not try it. So I'm hoping I love it. I will report back, of course. And I already said I hope I love it. And I'd love for people to weigh in if you think I will enjoy it as well. Next, let's talk about The Girl with All the Gifts by M.R. Carey, and this is probably going to shock people, but I have never read this book before. Now, I know the general subgenre of this book. I know it is a girl who wakes up in this institution. There's something strange about her, and the story itself goes from there. Now, everyone on the internet seems to spoil the subgenre of this book and what it's all about, but I come from the fact that I remember when it was first released, and at the time, everyone said to go into the book blind and don't talk about what the book's about. And it was so much fun at the time when there was a mystery around the book. And so even though I think most people have been spoiled for what's actually happening in the book, I don't want to add to those spoilers. So I'm going to keep it really vague here. If you follow my channel, of course, know that I love horror. I think it's shocking I haven't gotten to this beloved book, especially given the fact that I tend to love books in that subgenre. And so I'm hopeful I will like this book. I've read some of this author's other work and haven't been over the moon about it. And for whatever reason, I just keep putting this book off, but it has been recommended to me so many times. I did a video talking about books to read after finishing The Last of Us, and so many people told me to go read that book, and so I'm finally doing it several months later. Next, let's talk about 11/22/63 by Stephen King, and this is a time travel sci-fi thriller that deals with the assassination of JF Kennedy. Now, Stephen King is an author who you will see on my TBR over and over again, but you probably have noticed that he doesn't always end up in my review wrap-ups, and that's because I have a hit or miss relationship with this author, and I do give myself permission when it comes to backlist titles, meaning books that I haven't read through publishers, older books. I will sometimes put them down if they're not working for me. So yes, I did end up putting down Under the Dome by King over the winter months. I just was not feeling it. I didn't really want to spend that much time on a book that I thought was going to be just okay for my taste. However, I keep coming back to this author because, as I've said before, there are books by this author I love, and so I'm always hoping to find another favorite. So this spring, I'm going to focus on this one. A lot of people say it's one of his best. I actually am quite interested because it's not technically horror, and I know a lot of people who don't like Stephen King in other places who adore this book. I'm just hopeful that this is a book that will work for me and hopefully overcome some of the things or roadblocks that keep me from always loving Stephen King. So hopeful for this one. I don't have a huge love or passion for American history, so I'm hoping that doesn't hold me back because I only know a bit about the JFK assassination, and it's not a topic that I read about or focus on, so tell me that I don't need to be passionate about that time period of history in order to enjoy this one. Next up, I want to do more translated horror. This is sorely a space that I don't feel like I'm doing enough of these days. So I want to read Battle Royale, the classic Japanese story that of course was the inspiration for the Hunger Games and things like Squid Games and so many things that have come afterwards in our modern culture. And so I really want to go back to the source. I've seen part of the movie because my husband was watching it. I wasn't really a fan, but I need to go back to the source material. I hope I like it. I'm expecting it to be bloody and brutal and messed up in all the ways that Japanese horror can be, where it really can be over the top and just surprisingly dark and messed up. And so I'm looking forward to getting into this one. Obviously hope I love it. Even if I don't, I feel like it's one of those iconic books you just kind of need to read if you want to get into translated horror. It's just such a big one. And last we have Metro 2033. And this is one that is post-apocalyptic. I know very little about it. I know it's a very iconic Russian story that again has been translated. I have not played through the video game that is so popular around this book. And so I'm going into it relatively blind. I'm a little bit nervous again because the fact that post-apocalyptic depressing stories aren't always what I'm looking for these days, but again, I'm focusing on big books, which you'll see in this video. Once again, like my winter TBR, I want to read the biggest books on my TBR this coming year, and so I'm continuing to do that. So I honestly just went to my Goodreads, sorted it by length, and I'm picking out those really big books, so I focus on them. I will read it, I will try it. If I finish it, I'll report back. Now, moving on to science fiction, I actually have the most books in this category because it's just what I'm feeling right now is I really want to read science fiction. And on top of reading big books this year, my other goal specifically is to knock out some of the really iconic popular series and titles that, as someone who reads a lot of these genres, I feel like I should have already read. So you'll definitely see that theme within the sci-fi category. The first one I want to talk about is Starship Trooper by Robert Heinlein. This is a book I'm going into quite blind. I've never seen the popular movie, and it's actually my first time reading Heinlein. I'm a little bit nervous just because I've heard that the audience on the internet is very passionate and very controversial, and everyone just disagrees, and it causes all kinds of problems online. So I'm hoping that we can all play nice. I'm hoping I like this book, obviously, but I'm looking forward to checking it out. I do want to do a follow-up video talking more about military science fiction. I've had a lot of interest in my channel for me to do that, but I think I need to read a few more of the classic books before going about and trying to film that video. Next, I want to read Contact by Carl Sagan. This is a fiction book that I've been dying to read since I first realized that I had an interest in hard science fiction. I don't know again much about this book. I believe it involves alien contact, hence the title. And while it is a piece of fiction, I believe that the author draws from a lot of speculative and hard science ideas and things that we believe to be true and just dumps a lot of science into this book. That is what I'm hoping for, and I will not be disappointed if that turns out to be correct. So looking forward to finally reading a book by this iconic scientific mind. Next, I want to do Ministry of the Future by Kim Stanley Robinson. This is a book I talked about recently in my book haul because my dear friend Whitney from Secret of Storycraft gifted me an audiobook copy. I hope we're going to be doing this as a buddy read this spring. And in that video, I talked about how excited I was for an optimistic book about the future. Everyone told me I was horribly mistaken. Apparently this book is super depressing and I should not go into it looking to be uplifted. Regardless of that, I'm still interested in it. Again, I really loved New York 2140 by the same author, and so I'm hoping I will love this one too. I just have to try it out. I am going to just prepare myself to be depressed and go into it with the right mindset, but I definitely need to read more by this author given how much I loved his last book. And I'm also going to be reading Too Like the Lightning by Ada Palmer. I have a copy of it, but it's over there and I don't want to run across the house to grab it because that was kindly gifted by my good friend Distant Earth in my book haul for Christmas. And so I'm dying to get to that book, and ideally, again, if I enjoy it, which I'm almost certain I will, I plan to read the rest of the quartet. And I've heard nothing but amazing things about it online. It sounds right up my alley. I, again, don't actually know much about the plot because when I hear really good reviews by friends that I trust, I tend to go into books pretty blind. I don't need a plot to sell me. It's more the idea or experience of a book that I'm looking for rather than a particular plot point that I need to read over and over again, if that makes sense. I also want to read Altered Carbon by Richard K. Morgan. This is a book I've been wanting to check out since the Netflix TV show came out, which I didn't end up even watching, but it just brought this book to my attention. I believe it is a cyberpunk thriller. It's supposed to be very action-packed, and I'm just really intrigued by it. Cyberpunk is a genre that I continually am drawn to. I want to love it. I want to dive deeper into it. I want to do a recommendation video on the topic, and I'm hoping that this one will scratch the right itch of having the aesthetics of cyberpunk I love, but with an action-driven plot that will hopefully propel the narrative forward in a way that I'm often missing in other cyberpunk books. So we'll see about that. I'm also going to finally read Pushing Ice by Alistair Reynolds. I think this is a book that has showed up on too many TBR, so it's about time I'm going to commit. I will read it this season. I won't let it fall into another TBR. This is a standalone by this author who has done very iconic works, and I'm slowly reading through all of their backlist. In this one, we follow these group of, I believe, salvagers who have to go off and investigate something that is nearby, and I have read the start of this book, so I actually kind of know where it goes, but I don't want to spoil too much of the plot. I can't remember how much is on the back cover, but again, it's one I really liked and stopped for various not excusable reasons, so I'm dying to get back to it. Again, I have checked out this book from the library probably 3 or 4 times. I think the librarian is giving me the side eye because I keep having to ship it to my small town and then ship it back and then ship it again. So hopefully this will be the last time they have to send the book to my little library, and I am definitely committing. This one is getting done. No DNFs. I'm going to the end and I will report back with a review. And last, for science fiction, I want to talk about Sci-Teen by CJ Cherry. This is another book that was gifted to me via audiobook, and I hope to do another buddy read for this. I don't know much about the series. I believe I have the full trilogy on audio, and I want to read it because I really love their other space opera series, and so a lot of people recommended me go here now to this series, and I didn't have it available through my library or through the used bookstore, and so it was a series I wanted to read but wasn't accessible to me. So really appreciate the gift and chance to read this one. I am definitely a fan of this author's work so far, and I plan to read more of them, so you're going to see them again in later TBRs, but I'm hopefully going to read through and hopefully love this series first. Last, let's talk about fantasy, and once again I'm going to be focusing on big books or long-running series, or particularly books that are really big and popular online, books that I feel like as someone who reads some fantasy, I should have read these books by now. And so the first one I want to talk about is Red Sister by Mark Lawrence. It's the first book in a trilogy, and again, it's a booktube darling. I hear so many people gushing about assassin nuns. I can be hit or miss when it comes to assassin fantasy, I've learned this year, but obviously I'm hoping that this one will be on the favorite side and something that will work for me. I have read this author before. I read their other trilogy that starts with The Prince of Thorns. A lot of people hate that trilogy. While I don't think it is the best fantasy I've ever read, I really enjoyed it, maybe because I happen to like little sociopathic main characters, so it worked very well for that part of my brain. I know that this one's going to be different. I've heard that the writing and the world building is even stronger, which I'm interested in, and yeah, I'm hoping to give it a try and obviously read the other 2 books if I like it as much as I think I will. Next, I want to read The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie, and ideally also read the 2 sequels of the original trilogy. Now, this is technically a book I've read before, so I am including a reread on this list, but the reason for that is I read this book so long ago. It was one of the first books I read when I was getting into fantasy, and I just don't think I was really prepared for what I was going to get. I didn't really really have the right expectations. I remember wishing the book had more plot. Now, having watched a lot more reviews and read a lot more reviews of this book and this trilogy, I understand it's a much more character-driven story and that the plot really takes a while to get going, more so in the later books. So now I'm going into it with the right expectations, and I'm also much more of a character-driven reader than I was, say, 8 years ago or whenever when I read it the first time. So I'm hopeful I'm going to love this book. I'm hopeful I'm going to love the series. It's kind of shocking for someone who loves grim, dark, messed up fantasy books as much as I do. I love things like a Game of Thrones. It's really shocking that I haven't gotten into this series yet, or at least properly into it. So I'm going to fix that this season. This is so long overdue. I also am going to try to read, emphasis on the word try, American Gods by Neil Gaiman. Now I'm saying try because I don't feel confident about this one. It is, I believe, a piece of urban fantasy dealing with gods walking among us. And for whatever reason, I just get the sense that I'm not going to like it. However, I love other books by Neil Gaiman. I enjoyed more his horror books, so things like Coraline, The Graveyard Book. I love The Ocean at the End of the Lane. However, I'm not sure if I'm going to love this one. I don't know if it's just going to be on my alley. I will give myself, usually with backlist titles, I give myself a lot more permission to pause or DNF books. And I want to be clear that has nothing to do with offending the author, because I always believe that my reviews are for readers, not for the authors. If they happen to watch my videos, that's on them. As well, I also am not afraid to put negative content out there. I think that negative reviews are important, both for steering people away from certain books, but then also negative reviews often make me pick up books that other people say are terrible. But for me, I'm going to give myself grace. I might put this one down, but I'm going to at least try it, because every once in a while, a book really surprises me. I just need to give books chances. I'm not someone who can always tell if I'm going to like a book until I try it myself. So again, if I have anything to say about it, if I finish the book, you'll know, and let's see how that goes. And last on this list, we have Malice by John Gwynne, which is the first book in a quartet, I believe. I know there is a follow-up series. I only plan to read the original quartet if I enjoy the first book. This is a booktube darling again. I've seen so many booktubers love this series. One that comes to mind is Mike's Book Reviews. And so I really trust his fancy opinions because he reads a lot more fancy than I do. And so I'm hoping I will like this one. I know it's a multicast story. I know that it's a bit more gritty and kind of has some, I think it has some grimdark elements to it. It's supposed to be an engaging plot. And again, I just need to try it. With fantasy, I'm still learning what I like and don't like in some regards because I'm much more confident in my science fiction taste, but I enjoy reading different genres, and so I'm going to try this one out. And again, I'm hoping I'm going to love it, and I'll let you know if I get through the series. Let me know what kind of coverage you'd like on that. So that's it for this video here. I'd love to know, of the books I talked about, which ones do you want me to prioritize, read first, or make sure that I get to this season? Typically, I'm actually pretty good with my TBRs, but occasionally something does fall off of the list. And so if I know you're interested in something, it motivates me not just to read it, but also perhaps do a dedicated review. So if you want to see an individual review video for one of the series I talked about, let me know in the comments. And again, if I know people are going to watch it, I'm more likely to film that video. If you want to stick around, subscribe. If you want to hit that button, I do read a lot of horror, thriller, science fiction, fantasy, as I mentioned here. So this video is pretty representative of what you'll see coming down the pipeline. And if you want to help me out with this video, give me a thumbs up, drop a comment, even if it's just a little emoji like a stack of books. It lets me know you're here, and I appreciate that. If you want to hit that little notification bell, you'll never miss a video from me. Thanks so much for watching. Talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.